Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always, here to recap last week's college basketball, preview the next week's college basketball. A lot of stuff going on in college basketball, some of it about the game, some of it not about the games. Greg, how are you doing?
Great, man. Just hunkering down in this blizzard, watching ball all day. Getting ready for podcast. So, we got a lot to talk about, Joe. But I know you did some shoveling with your parents. So my back's killing me? How's yours?
Pretty good. I just went out like three or four different times and made sure that the load was light. But yeah, it's glad that a lot of the games didn't get canceled. That was good that we were able to watch this weekend, and then yeah, we were able to take care of stuff. Greg, let's open with one of the bigger stories in college basketball, and that's Charles Bediako in Alabama, and we mentioned it a little bit last week, I believe. But he actually played a game for Alabama this week. He played 25 minutes in their game against Tennessee, scored 13 points on 5 of 6 shooting. Now, for those unfamiliar, Charles Bediako was on Alabama a couple of years ago. Hasn't played on the team in the last 2 years. Was in the G League. You can still vote for him to be in the G League All Star game, I believe. I saw a tweet about that, so we should all do that just as a funny joke.
Oh,
But this is this is getting to a point where, Bediako had an NBA contract, and even the guys like James Najee at Baylor did not have that NBA contract. And there's like every single way you could like make this a different thing than even what's happened earlier in the season. It is different. On top of that, we have the judge who granted him the TRO to play is an Alabama donor. His the judge's wife is someone who represents one of the former Alabama players who has done some questionable things under Nate Oates. So it seems like um, this is something that I would hope that those people would get in trouble for just ruling or the conflict of interest of something there, Greg. Um, but now we're just kind of picking and choosing who can play college basketball. So at this rate, we can go on and say, "Hey, I'm a Kentucky fan, Greg. We have some big games this week. All the other players are not allowed to play. The judge says, go find a Kentucky fan judge. They can't play. They're ineligible. In Kentucky, they can go get Ty Washington and Emmanuel quickly, and those guys can play this week. So that's where we're heading. Yeah, it seems to be a mess. Greg, what are your thoughts, real quick?
well, this is stupid. I feel like this really brings everything into play. All right, it seems like there's not really a line of delineation anymore for who can and can't play if this stands. Um, obviously he played in the game. The NCAA has said he's ineligible. We don't want to wipe the NCAA clean of any wrongdoing here because their sluggishness over several decades to fix their rules is probably how we ended up here in the first place. So ultimately, the fault resides, with the NCAA, but in the micro cosm of this particular game, obviously it's the judge making the ruling, and Joe's already pointed out the um, comically bad amount of you know conflict of interest that's just being ignored. Joe, this just I'll tell you right now, man. This just makes me worried. And I know I've said it in our group text this week. This just makes me worried that we're done with college basketball if something like this stands and it just becomes basically minor league basketball. I don't. If it's just anybody can play, it essentially just becomes a um. It essentially just becomes minor leagues now. Something tells me that this is going to get settled in a different way. And my question for you is the NCAA said Bediako is not eligible to compete. Obviously, it's only a TRO, temporary restraining order, that allows him to play. So, what do you think the NCAA does, making an assumption that they get this ruling overturned, it goes to a higher court, whatever, blah, blah, blah. What do you think the NCAA does with this game and any game that Bediako plays from here on out the rest of the season?
I think there's a definitely a world where they make Alabama forfeit the games he did play in. Um, there's also a world where they say, okay, you had a judge, our hands were tied, even though the judge was very biased. You had the judge do this. We can't penalize you now because you had the judge say you're allowed to do this, right? So I can see it going either way. I think ultimately they're going to come back and say that he can't play um, going forward, and that will be, I think, a big detriment to Alabama. Who, um, Greg, we haven't really talked about this angle of it. Like, yeah, we talked about Alabama needing a big guy. He played 25 minutes. I know he has familiarity with this program, but a lot of the guys who are playing right now weren't on the team the last time he was there. He's taking people's minutes. How is this good for the team? Like, yeah, sure, he had 13 points, 5 of 6 shooting on 25 minutes in his first game back. I think it has to be like to bring a guy in like this midseason who's a pro. I feel like the kids on the team who are having their minutes cut have to be pissed. And that's something that people haven't talked about the chemistry of it. They end up losing this game. Obviously, Tennessee is a solid opponent. I'm not going to say great opponent, but a solid opponent. But this is a game they're at home. They should probably win, right? So that's something to think about too. So in terms of what they're going to do, I don't know what the NCAA feels like they can do with their feel like their hands are tied behind their back right now. Everything they do is like ruled illegal, and they have to follow the laws and or the judge's orders. Um, but I know you've mentioned that you are skeptical about the players becoming employees because of the Northwestern thing. I actually do think that they could become employees, and this might be something that helps start it because there needs to be some sort of guidelines and rules, like you said, Greg. It can't. It could be the minor league. It could be minor league basketball, and I mean to be honest, it kind of has been in its history, right? It has been developing players for the next league, but I think we're seeing all these coaches stepping up, like Tom Izzo and John Calipari, and guys that even people like a lot of people don't even like John Calipari, Tom Izzo, in different ways. And it's like they're stepping up and saying, "What is this doing to the high school kid?" And calling out some of the other coaches who are doing this. And yes, there are plenty of coaches who are saying like, "Well, if it's legal, I'll do it," but I think it's wrong. So hopefully everyone seems like they're on the same side. Um, but it is funny that Nate Oates was the one who was bitching about other teams doing this, and then he did it too. So just classic Nate Oates. And I don't know. I kind of I feel like this might be a good thing long term that this happened because there's got to be some changes, and I think it's going to move the coaches especially to make those moves towards pressuring the NCAA to make these changes or the courts, whatever it might be, because high school kids are getting hurt. Like kids on Alabama are being hurt right now because Charles Bediako decided to leave Alabama and then come back. He had the choice. He could have stayed at Alabama and still been there, 5 years to play 5 or something. I don't know if that's what the rule was, but he didn't. He didn't want to do that. So sorry, Greg, for the long rant. It's such a confusing thing with all the laws, but something has to change to make it where it's like, hey, there's 5 years to play 5. You know, you have to go to class. These are the rules. And some sort of bargaining. And I know you, like I said, you have some skepticism. I think it could still happen, but we'll have to be figured out. Any other
Yeah,
thoughts on it?
it's just a lot of things that I've read have said it's a long road and it would be difficult to do. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this. It could happen. I just, the very little, social media posts and stuff. I don't know that I've read anything in depth and whatnot, but I mean, an institution this big, it does kind of seem like there would be some hurdles to cross. Not saying that
Mm.
they couldn't be crossed, but uh, I don't know. I just don't want this sport to go away. We are coming off an awesome week of the actual on the court basketball, so we can move on to talking about that. Joe, the only and you did say you went on a little long. I'm gonna put this in there. It's overdue from when you mentioned it, but you talked about Bediako taking minutes from his players, and I just wanted to say, do we know that that Oates did or did not discuss with Gordon Bombay how to handle this kind of situation?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, um, Adam Banks is a better player than Charles Bediako will ever be. So
Wow,
there is
true.
that. But yeah, I think it's shame on Nate Oates, shame on um, even Bediako. Like, dude, like I don't know. You chose to leave. Stick with your decision. You know, that there's so many different ways to go with this. You're right. We should probably move on. For the foreseeable future, I'm sure coaches will still try to get these players. But we'll talk about the basketball and what's left. Like you said, Greg, it was a good week.
a couple of things that I just minor things that I want to add. I feel like this is going to get rid of the once you declare for the draft, you're not like, and I know they've kind of loosened the ruling on that, but I just don't understand why that's even still a thing. So what your name's in the draft that has these players have agents now. I just that needs to go. And if this is what gets rid of that, and a player can quite literally, we don't have to play this game every April and May where who's going to put their name in the draft and who's not. Like just let them put their name in the draft, or just say it's like, I mean, college baseball deals with this, right? Like everybody's name is technically in the draft whether you entered or not, correct?
If you're
If you're
eligible,
eligible,
because yeah, if you're out of high school, you can go, and then if you go to college, you have to stay 3 years. So
right.
yeah,
I just I don't know. I There could be some good things that come from this. I worry that the ultimate end is the sport looks nothing like it does now. And granted, it's changed quite a bit in the last 4 or 5 years, right? It's had a major facelift.
yeah.
But my fear is this kind of thing is going in a direction that could make it something completely and wholly other than it is. And I'm glad that's why, coaches are stepping up and talking about these high school kids, because if it becomes another league where it's just a bunch of, you know, 25 to 35-year-old guys, then it's basically NBA light, you know. This college
Yep.
athletics has always been something a little bit different. And granted, that definition has changed a lot in the last couple of years, like I already said, but it's still in substance feels different. And we don't need to have an hour conversation about that. But I'd like it to keep a semblance of the sport that I love. But the only other thing I wanted to mention, Joe, is like I've seen people putting out, how to handle this Bama thing. Well, oh, just don't count it when you're considering them their games for selection, or just don't let them in the tournament at all, and that violates the TRO. So people have been throwing out certain ideas, and they don't have legal base. From what I'm reading, they don't have legal
Mm.
basis to treat them any differently than they do another team, or they can face litigation. So the NCAA is kind of in a rough spot. But circling back, it's the NCAA's fault in the first place. We are not washing them of their faults of just sticking with this amateur type model for entirely too long. That's how we got to this avalanche of changes over the past decade.
Yeah, so they can't do anything right now during this TRO, Greg, because that would violate it. They can, like I said earlier, they can rule these any games Alabama plays with him ineligible. They can nullify him if it comes back and they rule in NCAA's favor. So right now they're kind of in a holding pattern, right? And the TRO is over pretty soon. Um, but there's a way where they can say these wins are vacated; those don't count for your resume. They could say, I mean, to be honest, you played an ineligible player. You went to the courts to do this. These games don't count. You're out of the tournament because of that. Honestly, because if it goes on much longer, I mean, how many wins? Or I mean, they lost this game against Tennessee. How long is it going to be where it's like this actually has an impact on how many games they win and everything for the final record and everything? So that's where it gets tough. And again, you're right. Like right now, the NCAA is kind of hamstrung to do things different ways because of the courts and the laws. But I think it will get better, Greg. And I think you know the off seasons will be the bigger time to push for change for this stuff. And I think a lot of the coaches will do it. It is sad in some ways that we are at this point, and it makes. I guess the larger point is the players don't want this to change because they're making more money than they ever would in a structure where they agree to something, like a union. Um, but there might need to be that for the betterment of the players in the association. There's a players union for every other sport. If this is going to be somewhat like professional sports, even if it's going to be college based, maybe there should be a union to kind of look out for the best interest of things. That's why, rookies don't make more money than the veterans in the NFL anymore because of the pay scale. Like there could be different things you can do. Hey, you can only get one free transfer, and then you have to sit for a while. So good things will come of this. As of right now, this hasn't bothered me to like the Bediako thing is like one small piece. It hasn't bothered me as a whole because it's so still limited where it's like, oh, there's one player here, one player there. If this gets to be a bigger thing where it's like every team goes in the G League and gets someone, I'll be like way more upset about it. But you're right. There's a lot of basketball to go over, Greg, and there's a lot of solutions to be found for this problem. Um, let's move on to our week in review. And we can talk about this more as more news comes about with the TRO and everything too. All right, so on Tuesday, we have some quick hitters. NC State beats Clemson on the road 80-76. Van Allen Lubin has 22 points and 6 rebounds in that one. Some other quick hitters. Vanderbilt and Arkansas play in that big game. Arkansas is at home, wins 93-68, blows them out. Trevor Brazil has 10 points, 14 rebounds, and 4 steals in that one. And Greg, the Miami Redhawks are they've had some close calls. They won in overtime 107-101. Peter Suter had 27 points and 10 rebounds, 8 assists, which is big with their starting point guard being out. They're playing so close to this razor's edge here. Any thoughts about the quick hitters before we move into the bigger game?
Yeah, this Miami team, whew, they're living on the edge. Joe and I have already mentioned a couple times, they're without their starting point guard for the rest of the year. I think if I remember correctly, you were in agreement with me, Joe. They're probably not getting to March undefeated. The question we were asking with each other was, how many losses can they take and still lose the MAC title game and still get in? It's probably one at most. I think was what we ended up arriving at. Vanderbilt, bit of a slide. I still believe in this team as far as a top 15-ish team. This road loss to Arkansas was bad. I just I know they're on a bit of a rough patch. They lose Texas, Florida, Arkansas right in a row, and then they beat Mississippi State this weekend. So back to their winning ways, I guess. But it's going to make that Kentucky game on Tuesday really interesting. That is in Nashville, so we'll have our eyes on that one. Didn't think it was, a marquee of enough game to put in our picks, but that game has some implications in it for both teams, I think. So, and teams that kind of are going in opposite directions right now with Vanderbilt on a bit of a slide in Kentucky, as Joe said. They took care of business this week. They made it dramatic at times, but they did take care of business. So I owe you apologies, Joe.
It's all good. We ruled them out last week or 2 weeks ago on the podcast or win a national championship, and that is still fair for what they're doing. And honestly, they've taken care of business that they should have taken care of, Greg, but there is still a lot of work to do, specifically when the schedule gets tougher this week, as we said, when they play Vanderbilt, which we will talk about a little bit later. So those are the quick hitters from Tuesday. The surprising result, Greg, is Purdue goes on the road and loses to UCLA. Now, I think we've talked enough about how teams going out west can and vice versa, can lose some of these big games. They're college kids. It happens. But I think it was a little bit surprising that it was UCLA, who's had a pretty rough season overall. UCLA, Donovan Dent hasn't had quite the year. Sky Clark was out for this one. But Donovan Dent takes over, 23 points, 13 assists. This is a game where Tyler Bilodeau had a 3-pointer with 8 seconds left to go ahead. And I think this does put UCLA kind of in a way better spot for the tournament. They're up to 42 in the net. So I think they were kind of looking at the outside looking in, and now it's like this win. Although I don't think the committee looks at individual wins too much. I think this win kind of helped the resume enough to kind of put them more in contention for the tournament. So that's the UCLA side. I have a lot to say about Purdue. We're going to talk about them in the very next game we're going to talk about too, Greg. So I'll save some of what I have for Purdue, but just from this game specifically, TKR did not have the best game. Fletcher Lawyer did not have the best game. And that's kind of something, a theme I'm going to talk about later. The last thing I'll say about this game specifically, Greg, before we kind of get into more of it, UCLA won this game. Mick Cronin had more comments. We love the Mick Cronin press conferences. He wins the game and says, "Thank you, Big Ten, for scheduling us 5 of 7 on the road." And then he also says, and then we get Purdue at home, and thank you, Big Ten. And it's like he's complaining, but you just won the game, which, I thought he was going to be like, hey, this is a tough schedule. We got through it. Like we're going to come out the other side now. It was more just like the same old bitching. So good for Mick Cronin for having the platform to do that. But that was kind of like the UCLA. I feel like we should celebrate this win for them more. But it was kind of like at the end of it, it's like we're talking about Mick Cronin complaining about the Big Ten, a conference that his school chose to join. So here we go.
I feel between a rock and a hard place with this one because the bigger picture, he's right. This whole thing is stupid. UCLA should not be in a Midwestern conference. That being said, it's Mick Cronin. He loves to whine. I can't stand him. It's just, you know what I mean? It's like I don't even want to say I see both sides because the whole basis of UCLA being in the Big Ten and Cal and Stanford being in the ACC, it's all stupid. It's dumb. But going on about this a after a win, and I know he also made a comment about how well Purdue's been there since last week. So I don't know. If anything, I feel like with the unbalanced schedules, the fact that you get Purdue at home instead of having to play them on the road, you take that as a positive. But I don't know. It is what it is. This team, I was impressed with the defense. Holding a top 5 offense in the country to under 70 points was not the story that they had against Illinois later in the weekend. So props to UCLA on that. And maybe this is where they turn a corner. And I don't think they're ever going to reach kind of where we thought they might be preseason, but they could be a dangerous team come tournament time. Especially if they are kind of getting all the wheels rolling and Donovan Dent is showing up. Bilodeau had a couple of big shots here. And I'm kind of like you. There's going to be a couple of thematic things, but Clough struggles to recover at times with these hard hedges and these pick and rolls. You already said it about Lawyer. They're not getting a lot from him right now. So that is concerning for a team that we're talking about as one of the, 7 or 8 national title contenders right now that we have. Didn't think we'd knock them off our list at any point in time or even consider it. But when I'm looking around, Joe, and I am not saying we're doing this today, and when I'm looking around and I'm saying, okay, we're going to have to get down to whatever amount of teams, there's some glaring holes with this team. And I think you've alluded to that in several ways at times, but I think I'm more concerned now than I was before. If you look at this game face value and say, oh, it's a West Coast game, it's UCLA, it is what it is, that's fine. But there's just some things that I'll be with you on this. We'll touch more on it when we get to the Purdue Illinois game, but kind of raising some red flags for me on Purdue.
Yeah, definitely. One last note on UCLA, Greg. They played Purdue, and then they were at home against Northwestern. They won that game. They're at Oregon, but like the flip side of being 5-7 on the road for Mick Cronin, who again complaining about being in the Big Ten, and we kind of agree with them that it would be really cool to have the Pac-12 still, but because they're in the situation, they joined the Big Ten. They're kind of the reason. They're one of the schools is the reason why all this conference realignment happened. They play at Oregon this week, and then they get like 3 straight home games, and then they have 2 road games, and then 2 home games, and then it balances out in a different way, and it's going to come back to you. So yeah, is it tough to build momentum at the start of conference play? Sure, but what are we whining about here? I don't get it. So I think John Rothstein just talked about how that's just how Mick Cronin was brought up. Is he complained, he does this stuff, and it's worked out for him in certain ways. Obviously going to a Final Four with UCLA and all that. So yeah, UCLA. Hopefully, that gives them some momentum. They don't have a true. I mean, they have Indiana at home, but they have to wait until mid-February till they play some big Big Ten games. They have at Michigan, at Michigan State, and home against Illinois in a row in the middle of February. That's kind of when I would love to see check back in with them and see if they've run the table until that point or won all but one game or something like that, and just kind of see where they're at with the tournament. So. All right, so next up, Greg, let's just go right to the Illinois-Purdue game. We'll come back to quick hitters after that, just to kind of keep it on the same page here. Illinois wins 88-82, and no Kylan Boswell. I mentioned it last week, Greg. I thought this could be a good thing for this team long term. Obviously, don't want anyone to get hurt, but you want to see what you have, what you don't when you don't have your constant guy who's been there for a couple of years. And they, Keaton Wagler, 46 points, 13 of 17 from the floor, 9 of 11 from deep. A million step backs, getting into the lane, creating shots. He had his 40 points in the first 30 minutes of the game. So he only scored 6 points the last 10 minutes. That was an unbelievable performance from a guy who was a very under-recruited guy, underranked guy by the recruiting services. Um, at this point, sets him up very nicely to be a one and done. One of the better performances. We have a couple of good freshman performances, but honestly, one of the better freshman performances I can ever remember. 9 of 11 from three obviously speaks for itself. So, and not just that, they were tough three, step backs, everything. So good for him. Illinois gets a big win, and I think finding that out that they have a guy who can do that when someone's down is going to be huge. And when they put it all back together, that's going to be fun to watch. The Purdue stuff. Yeah, it is something that needs to be addressed because, the defense is not great when you let a freshman like that, who is very talented, get that many points. We had Trey Kaufman-Renn again have a down game. We had Fletcher Loyer again have a down game. And there seemed like there was some like adjustments by Matt Painter to try to fix some of that. Fletcher Loyer only played 20 minutes in this game. But I mean, it's like Braden Smith, and it's not much else, and that's could be an issue for him. And like I said, we will. I have more points about how I feel about Purdue, but that's kind of setting up this game. Is Illinois great performance from Keaton Wagler, and for Purdue, it's like that's kind of more of the same that we just talked about.
Yeah, I kind of already alluded to it, but the defense for Purdue, like you said, it's what's really giving me pause. And this was an up and down the floor type game, which most of these teams like to play really slow. I mean, it was just all offense. Braden Smith is really good at getting out in transition, even off in just where you normally wouldn't think there'd be the fast break opportunities. Um, Purdue spent a lot of this game switching 1 through 5, and you really saw like Wagler was taking advantage of those switches, and he ends up with Clough on him. He got a couple of those step backs, and he got to the bucket on drives a couple of times early. He did a lot of damage early in the game, like within the first 10, 12 minutes. Uh, like Joe, like you said, Purdue made some adjustments. They went to the hard hedges, and that's what cost them the game at UCLA with the Bilodeau shot. And it just Illinois really took advantage of it and got Purdue in rotation. And they were still in the game because of how good their offense was. And Illinois is not the best defensive team either, but you know I'm walking away from this game saying again, Illinois is not by any stretch of the imagination a significantly better defensive team than Purdue, but just the length and the amount of options, it really feels like us kind of being in on this team, even when they were kind of figuring things out and struggling earlier in the year. It's paying dividends now because we talked about in the week 6 show, hey, this I believe they were ranked 13th in that AP poll. And it was you're looking up and down the poll and you're like, hey, this is one of those teams that if we're going to break this, top 12 in the week 6 poll curse kind of thing and win the national title, this is one that they don't look the best now, but watch out. And here we are without Kylan Boswell, as you mentioned. And Stojakovic had not one of his better games. So it's just there's this team is dynamic. There's a lot of length. They move the ball really well, and that is without their floor general. So there's a lot to like about this team if they can figure out some things defensively. And trust me, they've got that arm length that can be pesky. So I think this team is a national title contender, and I don't think that's a big stretch of the imagination to say.
I mean, no, it's. I think I'll start with that. No, it's not. I think they have something that Purdue doesn't, and that is uh, that functional length on the perimeter. They have length on the interior. They have athleticism on the perimeter as well. and they have guys who can create their own shot. And like Braden Smith can in some way, like the pick and roll and then pulling up from mid range is like kind of his thing, right? Does he always get to the basket? No. Does he always create his own shot in the same way that like Keaton Wagler was doing? No. They don't have that. It's very set in stone and kind of like old school offense. Um, and I'm with you, Greg. I think Illinois is a title contender, and I honestly I don't think Purdue is. I think I'm gotten to the point where it's now can their defense hold up for a 6 game stretch against the best teams in the country? In the NCAA tournament, probably not. Braden Smith is surrounded by shooters, and that is good. But what are we like? You're kind of rerunning the same thing back with Purdue as last year. Their best chance was 2 years ago to win the title, right? Obviously with Zach Edey. That's like a dominant player inside. That changes the math a little bit. This team doesn't have that same math changing ability, and they don't have those athletes on the perimeter to kind of create their own shot. So it just makes it tough. Like Braden Smith has a lot on his plate. I think he is a very good point guard who can set up his teammates. But if you make him take all those mid-range jump shots and you say you don't help off of that on the pick and rolls and just stay attached to shooters, like Fletcher Loyer, he might have a bad shooting game. Braden Smith killing you from mid-range doesn't always hurt teams. That's why no one takes mid-range jumpers anymore. It like I don't know what team I have them as in terms of like who I have would win win the national championship. I would say they're probably not in the top 15 right now, and that might sound crazy, but you think about teams like Greg, if Darren Peterson's healthy, Kansas, teams like Florida, Arkansas, teams that aren't like top 15 teams right now, or maybe some of them are in the new poll, but in that range where it's like I would take those teams over a team like Purdue, and that's shocking for I think a lot of people had them preseason number one, and I think that's more about what we knew they had coming back. But they kind of like the issues we had with them the last year, or even the last 4 years, with some of the limited athleticism of their guards. They didn't address it, and I do think that deserves some criticism on Matt Painter's part because this was their best chance to ever win a national championship, and I think just having those two guards, even Loyer, I'm pretty much down on. He's an asset that you've had for a couple of years. TKR is an asset you've had for a couple of years, and you just never added those pieces. So I like Matt Painter as a coach. I think he's a very good coach. I just don't think he has the personnel, and I don't think he addressed it in the offseason that can maybe make this team a top 15 title contender, which is crazy to say for a preseason top team, right? So I don't know how you feel. I think you mentioned something similar about maybe not being in the top 7 or 8 title contenders, but man, there's teams in the 15 to 20 range, and I'm thinking like I would take them right now in a heartbeat over taking Purdue in a 6 game tournament. So
The only thing I want to full stop on is I think CJ Cox he had a good game against UCLA, and it was a little quieter at Illinois, but not it was at Mackey. That was the other thing we didn't even talk about was getting this team done at Mackey is a big deal. CJ Cox could give this team a little bit of dynamism that they don't have. He's going to really have to step up. So, we'll see what we get from that. Omer Meyer coming off the bench. I mean, he's got some skill to him, but it's not necessarily a lot of athleticism. So there's some pieces to this team that maybe Painter can figure out. Joe, the one other thing I want to touch about on this game that again still gives me great pause is they go out and they get Clough and they have Daniel Jacobson back from injury, and they're supposed to be a really good rebounding team, and they got torched on the boards. I mean, there were several times where Illinois had 3 or more chances at a bucket on a single offensive possession. And I think some of that goes to the length that I can't remember what the term you used for the functional length that they have, right? It's not just like Daniel Jacobson is not functional length. He's just length, right? So
yeah.
like he serves his purpose, but Brand Underwood is out here with his Serbian cap on, getting all these functional Euro guys, and I mean it looks like one of those teams, but that's very different from what Purdue has in terms of length. But I had a point and I talked myself out of it. Now I can't even remember what I was saying.
Well, that's all right. If it comes to you, you can bring it up later. But yeah, that's where I'm at with both these teams, Greg. It was, Illinois being banged up pretty much all year and fighting through it and being 17-3 at this point in the season is impressive. Whereas Purdue, from where they started and like how they've played games, and like just to be clear, they play a tough schedule non-conference, but kind of look back on it and it's like, they got killed by Iowa State at home. You know, a couple of their big wins are Auburn and Wisconsin. I still couldn't tell you what to make of Auburn at this point. I mean, it's crazy how they go back and forth. Um, they beat Texas Tech in Alabama. Alabama's now close to the back end of the top 25. So it's not like they don't have good wins. It's just they're not as tested as I kind of thought they would be, or as maybe they have been in the past couple of years. So I'm very worried about them. I'll be keeping track of them. And like I said, if Matt Painter does change something and I do get more athleticism or some sort of change to the offense that kind of opens things up, I will address that. But right now, on January 26th, I can't see them winning the national title, and I kind of think Sweet 16 might be where I'd pick them to lose, to be honest, right now.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. All right, so Greg, let's get to some quick hitters from Saturday before we get to the other game that happened that we're going to talk about in a large way. I'll start it with saying AJ DeBonsa had 40 points in his game for BYU. It was a Saturday for the freshmen, Greg. Three different guys scoring 40 points. We're going to get to another one in a little bit over here as the Kingston Flemings thing when we get to the Houston and Texas Tech game. Other than that, on Saturday, we had UConn beating Villanova in overtime, 75-67. Now, Greg, we have talked about how UConn is winning games. They are still 19-1. They're, top of the Big East, but they are struggling with some of these Big East teams. So that it was surprising. We had Auburn beating Florida 76-67. Keyshawn Hall continues to kind of take a step forward here, 24 points and 7 rebounds. On top of that, we had North Carolina beating Virginia. We talked about Virginia last week, Greg, not really having been tested, and North Carolina took it to them on the road there. So anything from the quick hitters that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I did get the chance, thanks to snow day today, to actually watch the full start to finish Carolina Virginia game. Virginia was up pretty big early on in the game, and Carolina comes back, closes it out. But I do walk away from that game, even though it's in Charlottesville and it stinks that they blew a big lead. That I think there's something to this Virginia team, and walking into last week saying, hey, this team could be, they could actually be nothing and just inflated schedule. I think this is a tournament team, and I think they have the chance to probably win a game. I don't think that's too far fetched. There's some good pieces on that team. I'm glad I got the opportunity to actually, watch the full game and whatnot. So I will have my eye on Virginia going forward. I think there's something to you agree or disagree with that? I'm just curious.
Uh, for sure, tournament team. I don't know what the ceiling is, but I think they're solid. Like I still don't know what their ceiling is, but I think they're solid.
Yeah, I think that's the good terminology for it is, walking into last week saying they may be nothing and just propped up by a schedule. And now I think solid is where I arrive at.
Yeah.
Tournament team, maybe they won a game. I think last week when we were talking about them, I said, oh, this is going to be an early kind of candidate for me to pick to lose the first game in the tournament. I'm not saying that won't be, but I think there's a little bit more substance there than I originally thought. Was at a bar for Auburn, Florida. That was like literally right before the snow really started coming down. So I got to watch the end of that. We went out so I didn't even tell you this, Joe. We went out to watch the UD game, UD St. Joe's, and because of all of the game shifting times, we only got to watch the second half. That was all we were able to watch at just because that's how CBS Sports Network did it. But so I ended up catching the end of this game. And now I'm like, I don't know what to do with Auburn, man. I know you just said something exactly like that. We've already had our conversations with Florida. We think they can be really good, but they have their flaws. We talked, Auburn was very close from having a good week 2 weeks ago, and a shot got waved off. So I don't know, dude. Are they maybe starting to bring things together?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, that's what I don't know what to make of them, and they still have some players who could create this like high ceiling. Maybe they're developing a little bit, but it's still like so hard to figure out game to game. Like I think tournament team, sure. I don't know where else to go with them other than that. They could be a team that loses first round, and I'd be like, sure. But like at the same time, they could go on a 2-3 game run and be like, that makes sense too. And I feel like that's a lot of the sport, like you said with Virginia a couple minutes ago, Greg, too. Like a lot of the sport is still trying to figure it out. I think part of it is, um, for like it's kind of like catch 22, right? For Auburn, they've played a tough schedule. They've taken some tough losses. For Virginia, they didn't play that tough schedule, and we're still trying to figure out both teams. Virginia maybe cheesing the metrics and like cheesing the net a little bit, but Auburn's more like tough and have played those games, but kind of like haven't come up big in a lot of them. So it kind of puts doubt because you've seen them lose more. Whereas Virginia, it's like, have they played anyone? And they're kind of looking for holes in both teams, and it's not really easy to figure out, I would say. All right, so let's get to the game from Saturday. We're going to go into more in depth. Greg, if Houston and Texas Tech could just play all the time, it would be awesome. These were two very good games. I'm glad they got to play each other twice in the conference. Texas Tech wins this one 90-86. They were obviously lost on the road to Houston earlier 2 weeks ago. JT Toppin, 31 points and 12 rebounds. Greg, I was impressed with his ability to pass the basketball too when he needed to. He's still working on a 3-point shot, but very good game. Loved the action from McCaslin to cross screen for him, get him open on the block, and pretty much get him wide open layups. I think that was good scouting. Christian Anderson, 12 points, 9 assists. McCaslin compared him to Jamal Murray on John Rothstein's podcast, and I was like, that actually makes a lot of. I know everyone tries to compare their guys to NBA guys and like fluff it up, but the way they play, scoring ability, but also passing, I like that. The X factor, Lawan Watts, only had 3 points, Greg, but other guys stepped up. Donovan Atwill had 18, Jalen Petty had 18, and that's all it is like they just need some guys to step up outside of JT Toppin and Christian Anderson. They did in this game. Um, we do have to talk about Houston a little bit too. Kingston Fleming's 42 points on 15 of 26 shooting, 4 of 9 from 3. Manuel Sharp, 20 points, and out of 6 of 6 from the floor, or 6 of 16 from the floor, sorry, and 3 of 8 from deep. Fleming's again one of those freshmen who scored 40 points this week. Overall, I think Houston, it's good for them to figure out that they have guys who can do this and have multiple guys who can score. But and there was some foul trouble in the first half, but I think you have to be very upset with the defense if you're a Houston fan. You don't see many teams score 90 on you, and that I think a little bit credit to Texas Tech, but a lot needs to be changed on that Houston team to kind of figure out how to stop guys like JT Toppin, which is not very easy.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I pointed out when I was picking this game. Hey, Houston plays great team defense, and that gets them this win. And obviously, I got this game wrong. So I still believe in Houston. It's hard to win a game in Lubbock. This Texas Tech team, though, they don't have a ton of depth. They are good when they're completely healthy. So as long as everybody stays healthy, this is going to be a fun team to watch. You're right, Joe. Seeing these two teams played a lot. I mean, there's been something brewing between these two teams, and I don't mean like they don't like each other, but just thinking about last year, the game at Houston and McCaslin and JT Toppin get kicked out in like the first. It was within, I think, before the second media timeout. They got kicked out, and Texas Tech ends up winning that game. It just these are two good teams, great coaches. I think they're both national title contenders this year. Um, Obviously, I have, even though Houston loses this game, I have more concerns with Texas Tech than I do with Houston. Just because of how short that bench is. It does seem like I think they got one of those guys back. Mosley, I think, was one of the guys that has missed most of the season. Correct, Joe?
Yes,
That
yeah.
was one of okay. So yeah, this is his first. This I was curious if this was his first game back. It is his first game back.
It,
So I don't know. Maybe that gives them a little bit more depth. And you talked about Watts only. I say only plays 22 minutes, but if you look at the box score from their last game, it was every starter playing 37 plus minutes. So you know
mhm,
maybe this just alleviates some of that. I don't know. Um,
yeah.
this is a fun game. Texas Tech gets the win. I don't think it really changes how I feel about either of these teams.
It does not. I could see both these teams making a Final Four, which again would be really fun to see that matchup later on in the tournament. But yeah, and Texas Tech still has other guys coming back from injury too. It just, I mean, if they get those guys, it might change the whole math on things for them. But yeah, it doesn't change anything for me. I want to see these teams play as many times as possible. It's been some of the best basketball games we've seen this year, and like you said, Greg, even the last couple of years. Gonna be excited to see how that goes. But Greg, let's get to a quick hitter from Sunday before we go to teams who can win. we have USC beating Wisconsin 73-71. Chad Baker Mazzara scored 29 points to help USC win. And, you know, they're a team that we have not ruled out of winning the title, but this is quite literally way more than we expected them to do after having some injuries this year, Greg.
Yeah, I think the bigger thing is they go win this game at Wisconsin. I
Yeah.
just, you're right, man. Like on paper, they should be kind of falling out. And all right, we kind of write this season off for SC and go to next year and look up. And yeah, they're 4-5 in the Big Ten, but they're 15-5. They get a huge win at Wisconsin. I remember talking last week about saying, hey, maybe Wisconsin's ranked, when they get to that Illinois game in a couple of weeks. And, this kind of puts a setback on that. Now I'm looking at what they have left. And I mean, I guess if they beat Minnesota, Ohio State, Indiana all right in a row, it's possible, but that was one I did not see coming. I thought it was at least worth mentioning.
Real shame in the game before this, they lost to Northwestern, who under 500, 1-8 in the Big Ten, one of the worst teams in the conference. So that's just what you're going to get. I mean, Chad Baker Mazzara is kind of what this team is. You don't know what you're going to get out of him any given night. So that's quick hitter. Greg, let's get the teams that can win now. We have a lot of teams. We want to get down to 30 at the end of next week's show.
Oof,
I
that's gonna
know
be hard.
I have a whole list of teams we can cross off. But Greg, is there anyone coming to mind where you're just like, I saw them
Well,
this week. They're low in the net. Anything like that?
this is what I don't like, that in the Google Doc I can see who you have in mind. I would like to arrive to some of these conclusions on my own, but I can see the teams that you have. Okay, let's take the first one. We don't even know if Mississippi State's going to make the tournament at this point. So I'm fine getting rid of them. I agree with that one. Um,
Right, I'm on the list to cross off twice. But no, that they were. I mean, the first SEC team we marked off was Kentucky. Maybe it should have been Mississippi State, who's really struggled this year.
yeah. Phew.
I'm, I'm I'll,
Oh
I'll
man.
go. I'll go while you're thinking. I'm going to cross off Butler. Um,
Yeah, that's
I
fair. Yeah.
I think they've had a rough go of it in Big East play. I'm not sure that they're built for it. That leaves us at 4 Big East teams, and even that might still be a little bit too much. Um, we'll cross them off, and like I said, we probably still need to cross like at least 4 or 5 more this week, and maybe a lot more next week. But I think Butler's out of it.
I mean, Utah State took a bad loss this week, didn't they? And again, I'm just trying to look for. Yeah, they lost to UNLV at home,
Yeah.
and they're on your. They were on. I thought you had them listed in your teams you were considering taking off.
No. No, no, no. I don't have any of the mid majors on our list of teams who can win on the list to take off yet. But I'm not saying it couldn't be a discussion.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of reasons um, to eliminate some of these teams.
Well, you
And
said
some of it, it's nice if it works out that you get a team that takes a bad loss and you're already. But I mean, some of these teams just kind of looking at and saying, okay, I just haven't seen anything. I mean, Oklahoma, they lose to Missouri on the road, 11-9. Again, there's really been nothing so far this year that has given me, and actually they're in the middle of what, like a 7-game losing streak. So I guess I'd go for that one.
all right, to Oklahoma. Greg, the other one we should say that last week you said Wake Forest. Wake Forest hasn't done anything, and they're you know under 500. They're 2-5. They're 11-9 overall and 2-5 in the ACC. Wake Forest is out. Um, what was some of the other ones I had that I think would be good. We could do. I mean, LSU. I don't seen them play a couple times. I don't think they're going anywhere. If you're okay with that. Um,
I'm game for that. I don't I
mm,
don't have a feeling about um
and
I don't know feeling about it. The one on your list that I'm probably fine with is TCU, because as mind-boggling as that team has been to figure out, I just can't see a world where they lose to New Orleans and win the national title.
Yeah,
It would
that
just be a strange season.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So we'll take TCU off. Let's see. I'll take Washington off too, Greg. They have some good players, but they have not played up to potential. I think Desmond Claude, a former Xavier Musketeer, that's how we know more of them, hasn't played. But they're 11-9 overall. Yeah, you're done. You're done for me. So we'll take Washington off there too. I would have said, USC and UCLA after this. I think USC is still very able to be taken off after losing to Northwestern this week. But I'll leave it up to you. If you want to take off more teams, we can. I think
I
we're probably around 45, which means we got to take off like
well,
15 next week.
so I am in the middle of highlighting them all and using that cool feature where it tells you how many cells you have highlighted. So we are at
There you go.
what number did you say?
Like 45.
We're at 46 teams.
Yeah.
So your visual recognition pretty good. Joe, what about like again, just focusing on leagues, like we're talking about winning the national title.
Hmm.
UCF, Baylor. I mean,
Oh,
again,
let's take Baylor off. Baylor's been bad.
you try to look for reasons, and they didn't necessarily have anything, bad happen this week. But you know, and we haven't even talked about another one of these 5-star freshmen. I couldn't say the guy's first name. I'm sure I would have it wrong, but he's a Yusufu. And I know his last name because I always think of the guy that played for Kansas a couple of years ago that transferred from Drake or whatever. But we're not even talking about some of the best players in the country. He's had a fantastic year, but that team, you're right, they've been bad.
Yeah. I'm cool with UCF if you are, Greg. If you want to keep on whittling it down, they haven't done anything to really warrant it, but they have started their fall after starting off so hot. Um, I would say, yeah, UCF and maybe Cal would be the
I
next
that was that
one.
was I was zoning in on Cal. Cal
All
was
right,
where I was going next. I'm curious. I just want to see where they're at in the net.
they're 52nd, I believe, or 50 somewhere around there, 55.
55. Do they have any wins that would even I mean like I forgot they beat Carolina. And
Yeah,
they beat UCLA in November. Oh my gosh, dude.
uh, they did. So they have a high ceiling, but they have not played consistently. Um, that's the thing is like, I don't know where else to go at this point. We could take off like I think Virginia Tech's can win the national championship? No, but have they done anything to earn it? No. So I would say if you want to take off UCF, we can kind of end it there for this week, which means we have a lot of work to do next week. But every week we get, there's more and more teams who
Oh,
take these big losses.
I know who we need to take off.
Purdue.
Oh, no. ACC team.
You mentioned wanting to take off Miami.
I do want to take off Miami.
All right, take off Miami. Fine.
Who was it that they lost to that was unbearable? That didn't they have a loss this week? Or Florida? Oh, lost Florida State at home. Yep,
Yep.
gone. Forget it. So yeah, Dayton beat that team by 30. Gone.
All right, so that's pretty good. I think there's plenty of teams next week we can take off pretty easily to get down to 30. Like I said, Virginia Tech, Stanford, even though they have Abuka Okori playing well, they have taken a decent amount of losses and may not make the tournament. There's some of the Big East teams maybe you can talk about that. UCLA and USC. I mean, one more week, even if like they don't do anything extraordinary, I think they're worth taking off. UCF, we can leave on for now if you want. We just means we have more work to do next week, Greg. But I think we've whittled down the list pretty well today.
Joe, I before we move on from this, I do want to hear you because I know you were big on this team earlier in the year. Um I want to hear your argument for keeping San Diego State on. I'm not even saying that we should get them off. I'm
Um,
not 100 like that they also I mean, I don't know. What do you you've probably watched them more than I have this year, so
uh, yeah, if you remember early in the season, they took some losses and like
they
Magoon
lost to
Guath was,
Troy. They also lost to Baylor,
yeah,
which
Magoon Guath wasn't healthy. I think they had two injuries earlier in the season. Um, I, they won, what was it, 7, 8 games in a row before they lost at Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon's not the worst loss, 74 in the net. And then they bounced back and beat UNLV, who Utah State, obviously lost to. I would say they're definitely on the chopping block in terms of all the teams we're talking about. Do I think they're better than some teams we still have eligible, like, maybe USC or UCLA or Stanford or something? Yes. Are they a lock to get an at-large bid? No, but they're 47th in the net. I mean, we don't have too many top 50 net teams taken off right now. I guess we took off LSU and TCU tonight, but in Miami as well. But I'm cool. If you want to take them off, we can. I
No,
just
no, I'm not saying I even have an opinion one way or the other.
yeah.
I feel like you have a finger on the pulse with them more than I do right now. So
Yeah, actually, I do like the Mountain West teams. We have San Diego State and Utah State in this. I think they can go on a run. I don't know if they can win at all. Gonzaga and St. Mary's. St. Mary's, I'm a little bit more. They haven't done anything to make me distrust them, but maybe a little bit. But it's just like more so. They lost. They lost to at Santa Clara, who's like a fine loss. They've lost against Boise State, and they've lost to Vanderbilt. But they also haven't played the toughest schedule. Like they beat Virginia Tech. It's just like, how many, I don't know if St. Mary's can do it either. So that's like, we can target some of the mid-major teams. We do have some mid-majors who are notable, who were already crossed off the list. That could, I don't think they can win it all, but they could burn us in terms of like that we crossed them off so quickly. Like St. Louis, obviously, and Miami, Ohio, still undefeated, but obviously probably not going to win the
Mexico
tournament.
too. They're having a pretty good year out there.
Yeah, they are. So all right, we'll leave it here for this week, Greg. But we'll come back, and like I said, I think it'll be easier to get some of these teams
One
off.
more thing before we move on, just since you
Yeah.
mentioned Gonzaga, we do need to at least mention Braden Huff out
Hmm.
for what 4 to 8 weeks with
Yeah.
was it a knee injury. So that's one where if they take a strange loss, like I wouldn't even call it strange. If they lose to St. Mary's, it may just be an adjustment period. They're expecting to get him back, but I think if somebody did the math, if they got him back at the full 8 week turn time, that would be I think after the WCC tournament because of when that is played. So that's just something to keep an eye on with that team who has had some good wins this year so far, and um, you know, and this just happens with Gonzaga a lot of years. They try to play who they can play out of conference, and then they go to this WCC schedule. Granted, the WCC has had years where they've had a couple of good teams, but it's just a quiet year for the WCC. Ugh, say that 5 times fast. It's just a down year, for the league as a whole. Even with Oregon State and Washington State playing in the league, so we pretty much won't hear a peep out of them unless it's bad news until
Yeah.
March.
Yeah, definitely. Like those notes, Greg. So putting these teams on notice, you're on the chopping block. I would say the mid majors outside of Gonzaga, Utah State's probably still fine. Gonzaga and Utah State are probably fine. San Diego State and St. Mary's are not. Other teams to watch out as teams we could take off this week: UCLA, USC, Virginia Tech, Stanford, Missouri, Georgia, maybe UCF. Just plenty of teams like that that will be trying to get down. I think we're at 43 now, Greg. So that'll be something we'll talk about with 13 teams to get down before the end of January, and then I think after that it'll slow down for us. We can kind of nitpick and see what type of teams could end up getting better and winning the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Joe, I really hope that we don't get burned for ruling out Larry Nerd too early. I really hope it doesn't come back to bite us.
Yeah, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We gotta watch out for that. I'd be cheering for us to lose if St. Louis makes a run. So that'd be fun. Um, all right, Greg, let's get to picks for the week now. We didn't recap too many games from this past week. Again, it wasn't there was a lot of things happening, but it wasn't like the biggest schedule. This week is a loaded week. I think this is definitely intentional with the NFL having the off week here before the Super Bowl next week. But let's get it started. Louisville and Duke, Monday night, Greg.
Yeah, we're not used to having Monday night college basketball games, but we've reached that big Monday kind of territory, like you said. No Monday night football. Louisville Duke. Michael Brown did come back and play this weekend. That's fine and great, but this game's at Cameron. I'm picking Duke.
I'm too. I'm definitely worried about the perimeter defense from Duke, which has shown lapses before. And maybe if Michael Brown plays and it's neutral site or at Louisville, I would take them. But Cameron Indoor, I think they're going to handle business. Duke's going to win. All right, next one up, we have Arizona and BYU in a big game. BYU But 17-2, 13th in the country. Arizona still undefeated, number one in the country.
Yeah, don't want to give away too much, but projecting a bit of a rough week for BYU this week.
Mm.
Um, I'm gonna pick Arizona's kind of earned that right at this point. They can win so many different ways. I'm gonna pick Arizona to win this game, even on the road at BYU.
I'm going Arizona as well. Just every time they get challenged, they are stepping up to it. And like you said, they can win in so many different ways. That is huge. Only 1.5 point favorites on the road, though, for those who are interested in that information. All right. Next one up, Greg. Tuesday, Nebraska and Michigan, number 5 in the country at number 3 in the country. Now, Greg, crazy. Michigan is favorited 10.5 points. I don't know. I mean, this is a 3 versus 5. I know that Michigan's at home, but this is kind. I mean, that's kind of crazy.
It is, but again, we kind of talked about there are some issues. This Nebraska team is good, but I think what I arrived at with them was kind of good, not great. So a little bit better than some of those solid teams we talked about. I think they get the job done as far as winning a tournament game for the first time in school history this year. But I think they're going to be outmatched in a lot of these marquee Big Ten games. This is one I don't think they get done at Michigan. I think Michigan wins this game.
Yeah, Michigan wins this one at home. I think Nebraska's superpower is having Rank Mast be a guy who can kind of create a little bit, can step out a little bit as a big guy. Well, guess what? Michigan does better than anyone and has the ability to match up with him. So I'm going to say Michigan neutralizes him a little bit and gets the win. Now, Michigan's also in our next game, Greg, on Friday. Michigan at Michigan State on Friday night. Should be a fun one to watch there. Number 3 in the country, at number 7 in the country. Tom Izzo in the headlines this week for telling guard Kurt Hang that he couldn't guard his mother, who is now, I think 98 years old. So a lot of issues for Michigan State despite being 18-2.
Well, yeah, but his players still love him even when he says stuff like that. So, Joe, I think this is one of the few games we disagree on this week. Like Joe said, it is a loaded schedule, but we have like mind a lot. I'm picking Michigan on the road at Michigan State. This is really a coin toss for me. Um, it would make the sport more interesting if we come back next Monday and we're talking about Michigan losing twice. If they lose to Nebraska and they lose to Michigan State. I think it makes things more interesting. I think it gives a little more drama to the season. But I'm taking them to win this game, even on the road in East Lansing.
Yeah, I'm taking Michigan State. I think they've been pretty solid, albeit not really tested after that loss at Nebraska. The difference is they get this one at home. And Greg, I think, sorry, excuse me. I think if they've the fact that we've kind of worried about their 3-point shooting and they're shooting 35.8% as a team. I think that's if you would have told me that at the beginning of the season for Michigan State, I'd be really happy. So I'm going to go Michigan State at home. I think if it was neutral or obviously at Michigan, it'd be a little bit different, but I'll take the home team here.
Yeah, the Elliott Cadeau Jeremy Fears matchup gonna be fun to watch in this game.
Passing, yeah. Um, Kansas and BYU are playing on Saturday. Kansas is hosting BYU. Greg, you already alluded to your pick. What are you going to do here?
I mean, it's Fog Allen. This game's at BYU. I probably pick BYU. Darren Peterson did not play in a game this weekend. I think it wasn't anything to do with the hamstring, right, Joe? I thought it was an ankle issue this time, which
Yeah.
it sounds like. I think I think it was just more of a short term thing, not anything that we're going to have to deal with lingering. But I mean, they took care of business this weekend even without him. So who knows with this team? Maybe they're figuring stuff out, and maybe that's just going to be par for the course in new age college basketball with tons of transfers. Maybe teams are just going to take longer to gel and whatnot. But I'll take Kansas to win this game at home, which is not the craziest thing in the world to say, considering where they play and how good they are at home, and how good Bill Self has been coaching at home. But it is a pretty big week for BYU. So we'll see.
Yeah, we definitely did not credit the fall girl. Who did we take to beat at Kansas earlier this year? And Kansas ended up winning and kicking their. I think it was Iowa State, right? That we both picked Iowa State, and Kansas ended up kicking their butts.
Yep.
I'm a little bit worried about this Kansas team long term. I do think the ceiling is super high. I think they could win it all, to be honest, if Darren Peterson is healthy. We just haven't seen it all the way. But this is also like Bill Self is having more health problems, which are more serious. He's had heart problems in the past, so I'm hoping he's healthy. He missed the game against Colorado last week too, so Something to watch out for there, and I'll take Kansas at home in this one. And like I said, BYU I don't think has properly been tested in a while, and that's why I took Texas Tech to beat them last week. I think it's going to be one of these like tough weeks where they lose two, and then maybe in the end of the year they start kind of learning how to win these big games with a lot of new pieces on that team. All right, Sunday, Greg. There is no more NFL football on Sunday for this week at least, and then we only have one game the week after that, Super Bowl. What means more time for college basketball? We have Alabama and Florida is the first game we're going to pick, Greg.
Yeah, I don't want the team that has the NBA player to win, so I'm going to take Florida at home.
Yeah, can't
Also, I
wait.
don't think they're going to lose another game at home right in a row.
I can't wait for the college front court of Florida to kick the professional front court of Alabama's ass. So I'm going Florida. Yes, they still take loss. I feel like, so maybe some people are like, oh, we thought Florida figured it out and then they lost to Auburn. Like, yeah, it's kind of like surprising, but that's what happens in college basketball. There's not perfect teams usually anymore. I mean, they're going to take losses, and sometimes it's the teams you don't expect, even if it's Auburn. And this is I think they're going to get back on. They're still on the right track. They're going to stay on the right track. I think this win, they're going to beat South Carolina this week, and then this win against Alabama will help them kick off probably another 5-game winning streak before they take another loss, and that's a pretty good run. Even if they're saying I thought you guys said that Florida figured it out. I think they have figured it out. So next one up, Greg, Illinois, number 9 in the country, Nebraska, number 5 in the country, capping off this awesome week of college basketball. Who are you going with?
Oh man, we can't give all the love we did to Illinois and then pick Nebraska. Nebraska's in that situation like BYU where I think it's I here. So I'm taking Illinois. Before your pick, Joe, if you told Nebraska fans you can go 1 for 2 or you can roll the dice this week, I feel like you take the 1 for 2 and be done with it.
I mean, I think I would take the 1 for 2 because I think it's more likely that they lose both. But if it's like, oh, we're already 20-0, why not see what we can do? Like, I'd be fine with that if you took the risk. I'd probably take the 1 out of 2 though if I was like, this is what's going to happen. So, yeah, I'm going Illinois in this one. Mentioned how the guys can create a little bit more maybe than Nebraska in terms of for their own shot. I think Nebraska's defense could be taxed a little bit in this one. Being at home, I thought about taking Nebraska, and I still think they're a very good team. But this Illinois team, I think, could be just coming together when Boswell comes back can be really dangerous too. So I'm going Illinois. All right, Greg. Any final thoughts for the week?
Oh, you don't even want to talk about games to watch? You just want to skip over it?
No, we don't need to. Go ahead. Give us games to watch.
Well, I rapid fire these. Big week for Kentucky. They have Vanderbilt and they have Arkansas at Vanderbilt, and we did already mention that, but and then they go to Arkansas. And Joe, I'm picking Kentucky to beat Arkansas solely on it would just be hilarious. It would just be hilarious for that to happen. Big SEC games in the middle of the week: Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas, Auburn. 4 teams that are kind of in flux. Tennessee's obviously been on the way down. Georgia's, fluctuated since making the top 25. Texas has had a couple of good wins. Auburn, we have no idea what to do with them. So just, again, games to keep an eye on. Saturday, there's a lot of other watchable games. SMU, Louisville, Ohio State, Wisconsin. Wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State won that one, even though it's at Wisconsin. And Auburn, Tennessee, and then also St. Mary's, Gonzaga. So, like Joe said, man, it's a loaded week. Some of those in other weeks we may have had those in our pick games, but we had to get the biggest games and spend the most time talking about those. So,
oh, definitely. Excited to watch some of these games. Obviously, the Kentucky game specifically, see what they can do after taking care of business. These are games they should not win being on the road. So let's see how they stack up in these games. Would be good for college basketball if Kentucky won, and just after Calipari won at Kentucky last year, it'd be kind of fun. St. Mary's, Gonzaga. St. Mary's, you're on notice. If you win this game, maybe you stay in our list of teams who can win. If you lose, might be on the chopping block. That's fun as well. And yeah, some fun like Ohio State, Wisconsin, SMU, Louisville. Let's see how some of these mid-tier teams like Ohio State, Wisconsin, bubble teams, maybe see how they do. So a lot of college basketball to watch here, Greg. Any final thoughts before we log off here?
let's get to the ball. It starts in like an hour.
1 hour. Yeah. All right, my turn to remind everyone to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast to our podcast. Leave us a review. That helps as well. Like and subscribe to the TGH YouTube channel where we're posting this podcast on YouTube. It always helps us out as we're moving along. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.